Welcome back to Meet the Makers. I have a super excited guest. I've been following him for a long time on TikTok, and I think you're going to love today's episode. He 3D prints, he has a potato launcher, and he's famous at Tractor Supply of all places. Super excited to welcome Lomax. Thank you so much for coming here today. How are you doing? Welcome to Meet the Makers.
I'm doing good. I'm so glad to be here. I've really been enjoying your show and all your guests, and I'm glad to be one of them now.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you on as one of them. This is like the question I jump everybody off with. I usually ask, how did you get into 3D printing? But for people who don't know you, when I think of you, you have this wild workshop. You have all these crazy projects. Maybe you can answer in 3D printing specifically, but I guess how did you get into just being a maker in general? Because you've got some cool projects.
Okay, so I was the kid growing up that took all the clock radios apart to see how they worked. I would take my toys apart to see how they worked. Sometimes I could get them back together and get them working again, sometimes not, but it was just the fun of it for me was taking them apart and checking things out. I played with Legos a lot, and I never wanted to build what was in the picture. I always wanted to build my own things. That's probably the start of me being a maker is Legos, really.
It's funny that you say that actually, because growing up, I all my friends had Barbies and things like that. And I always wanted Legos and licking logs were my two go-to things. And I was the same as you. I didn't want to build what was in the picture, but I just wanted to build whatever came to my mind. So it's cool to hear.
Yeah, the Lincoln logs were big too. My grandmother is a big reason I'm a maker. When I remember when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, her teaching us to do tin punching, which I don't know if you know what tin punching is, but you basically take a piece of metal and you put a design on it that's like a dot pattern. And you use a nail or an awl to poke a hole in it. You'll see sometimes in country chic kitchens, they've got like panels that they've tin punched in their cabinets or something. So yeah, my grandma was one of the people that really got me into making things and got my creative juices flowing.
That's so cool. I love hearing like when different family members inspire people to get into things. And I haven't heard of tin punching before, but I think I'm familiar with what you're talking about. Do some people, they have it as like maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Backsplashes or things like that?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you would see it on. Okay, so we're in the South down here. We're in North Carolina.
Okay.
You got a lot of people down here that just take what they've got and they try to make it pretty. And that's just one of the techniques that they use around here. Punch holes in metal and you can make a nice little pattern. If you backlight it, you actually get a nice little star effect, like a constellation effect from it.
I love that idea. I'm a huge person. I always love thrifting. I always love just taking things and transforming them into new things. So I love that spirit. You, for a while, one of the first things that really caught my attention in your content was, speaking of thrifting and things like that, you would go to Habitat for Humanity and you would 3D print mugs of your face and bring them and just like anonymously leave them there. Hilarious. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. What made you think to do that?
I don't know. When I go to Habitat about 3 days a week, because I'm a hoarder. So for anybody that don't know, can't be in my shop tonight because I have a horrible internet. But here's a picture of what my shop usually looks like. And you can see I got 3D printers here and the rest of it is just a hoard of. So I go to Habitat 2 or 3 days a week. I see what they got. If they got something cool that I want to collect, I buy it. If they got something cool that I can sell and make some money, I definitely buy it. Last week, I got a tape deck for $125 and sold it for $300. That's how I fund a lot of the projects that I do. You were mentioning my remote control lawnmower earlier that I've been working on. So that was a wheelchair, a powered wheelchair that I bought for $25 at a thrift store. And now we've got a remote control base that we're going to put a lawnmower frame on. Thrifting is to be able to find stuff and then use it to make other stuff is really what I like to do. One day I hope to open a repair shop / art gallery and have stuff that I make, have stuff that I fix and offer repairs to people. I don't know how I'm going to fund that yet, but I'm working on it.
I feel like the world works in mysterious ways. And we were talking a little bit before we hopped on here about your idea that you had for that. And I can just totally picture that being what you do. I would love the idea of that. Like I said, I was always a big fan of thrifting. And like you said, I don't know if this is like the same for you, but for me, it's like almost a treasure hunt when I go into a thrift shop of just what's going to be in there and what can I find. And there's a certain joy for me of thrifting that like going to a normal store just cannot bring me. I always say it wouldn't matter how much money I ever made. I would never stop thrifting. I absolutely love it.
Exactly.
Now, coming back to, so you have your RC lawnmower.
Yeah.
And again, that's another thing that when I see your content, I was like, it's not something you see every day or that I think most people would have the ability to execute on. How, when you walked into Habitat and you see this wheelchair sitting there, did you instantly go into it knowing that was your plan, or did you just see it and think this has potential?
So I've got a buddy that he is in a wheelchair, and he asked me a few months before I found this thing at the thrift store, if I could build him an off-road wheelchair, maybe, or maybe a off-road remote control vehicle that he could go hunt rocks with. He's interested in rocks and stuff. So I was like, yeah, sure. I found this wheelchair for $25, and I sent him a text immediately. I said, dude, I can get this wheelchair for $25. Do you want to start a project? He's not right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy this thing because I'm going to do something with it. Well, a few months before, I'd been talking to my wife about making my regular riding lawnmower electric because it seems like no more than I mow my yard, the engine's always messed up or something's always messed up with the internal combustion engine. And I'm like, I've got to figure out how to put batteries on this thing and just make it. And my wife goes, if you're going to make it electric, why don't you just make it remote control so you can sit on the couch in the air conditioner? And I'm like, you're a damn genius. And I'm like, that'll work. You can get them FPV goggles, or I could just put it on my TV. But the ultimate goal is to make this thing FPV so I can drive it around with the little goggles on and mow my yard from the air conditioning. All of it's a work in progress. I have a couple electric lawnmowers that I'm going to be taking the electrics out of to use for the lawnmower part of this project. Okay, I'm an ADHD person, and I'm probably the king of unfinished projects. I would go as far to say I probably got more unfinished projects than anybody else in our community. That's all I got to say because I've got them. I've got projects I've been working on for 15 years. And the main reason I work on projects so long is because a lot of times I use recycled and found objects to make my stuff that I want to make. I'm looking for certain stuff and I've got to wait until I find it. I could go out and buy it at full price, but I choose not to because of money. Money is another big problem that snags up a lot of my projects. I'm probably not a great budgeter with money. I probably should stop buying some 3D printers and finish some projects. But I'm gonna enjoy life because we only got a little time here, and you gotta enjoy it. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I'm the older I'm getting, the more I'm saying all that work's just not so important.
You say it makes me think of that TikTok sounder. They're like, man, I'm getting old. I'm gonna get real weird with it. That's what it makes me think of. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but yeah, for people who can't see your faux background that you have right now either, or aren't familiar with your content, I completely believe you when you say that you are the king of unfinished projects because, like I said, you just have the most, what I consider the most incredible workspace and what seems to be just endless amounts of projects in the background.
Yeah. Okay, I'm really lucky. So my building is a 24 by 36. So it's a really good sized building. Besides my car project taking up the most room in there of any one thing, the rest of it are all stuff that I will either use to make art, tool used to make art or other stuff. I've got an overhead projector. I've got welders, plasma cutters. One plasma cutter. I've got a MIG welder, a TIG welder, plasma cutter, I've got air compressors. I've got a full working shop. I've got tools to bend metal. I've got tools to drill metal. I've got a little bit of everything. I've always been taught that if you're not a rich person, you probably should invest money. And the best thing I can invest money in is myself. As long as I've got all these tools out in the shop, I'm not going to go hungry because I know how to use them. And no matter what, I know that if tomorrow things go bad with my job or whatever and I have to do something else, I've got the skills and the tools that I can start making money immediately, which is it's nice to have that security when you got a family.
Yeah, especially I think nowadays more than ever. It's something I think about all the time. I don't feel like a lot of people now know how to fix stuff or how to work on machines. And it seems to be a skill that less and less people have. As time goes on, I almost wonder if these certain trades and these certain arts that people, a smaller and smaller group of people know how to do, if they almost die out. And I don't even know what happens at that point because I don't see as many people going into these things anymore and learning these different crafts.
You're 100% right. We used to have a shoe store here in town. Actually, we used to have
Mm.
2 shoe stores that repaired shoes. We have none now. There's not a shoe
Wow.
store to repair shoes within probably 75 miles of where I live. And not long ago, I ran into a guy closing his shoe store down, and he was willing to give me all his tools
Wow.
if I would come get them for free. And we're talking $20,000 or $30,000 worth of stuff. But it was going to cost me $2,000 or $3,000 to move it all because I was going to have to rent trailers. I was going to have to hire people to help me. I was
Right.
going to rent a storage building to put it all in until I figured out what to do with it. And then that's a slippery slope because next thing you know, you've had the stuff in storage for a year and you've done nothing with it and you've paid, $10,000 of storage on it. So
Yeah.
I didn't get the shoe repair tool. But things like that. So much of the stuff we buy these days has become disposed. People do not repair things anymore. If you've got a TV that's broken, you might find a YouTube video for it. You might be able to find the parts for it. But you're probably not going to find a repair shop in town that's going to repair a TV because they're like, man, they're $400. Go buy you a new one. And so I guess we've lost a lot of being able to repair anything because of that, because we're not training people to repair this stuff. We're just replacing it. So a lot of people, unless they've grew up and had a tinkering bone like me, or they've had somebody to show them, they don't know that repairing stuff is even possible because it's just not on the brain.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And it's funny that you had given the example of the shoe shops in your town because I had been listening to a different podcast the other day and they were talking about they had bought these shoes years ago and they loved them. They were like these really special riding boots and they just had a sentimental attachment to them. They were talking about how every couple of years they would go in and get these shoes resold. And I'm listening, I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could extend the life of a shoe like that. But that's like such the world that we live in now where, like you said, when a new pair of shoes costs $30, like, why would somebody go and get them resold? But when you start to lose the ability to even know how to do stuff like that, it's crazy to think where that will lead us all in many years. Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, maybe we can ask AI to fix it.
Well, I'll ask ChatGPT if it knows, and maybe ChatGPT won't even know.
Man. I've been playing with Chat, and it is crazy how this stuff is working. This AI stuff it's a really interesting time we're living in. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can be able to do with this technology. I'm a little bit scared, the Terminator and all, but yeah, it's a really exciting time to be alive.
This is probably the first, I was like, when the internet was like progressing, I was still pretty young. So I guess I didn't really get to experience that wave the way that I'm getting to experience the wave of what's happening with AI now. So this is the first time in my life I've ever been like in the midst of technology evolving in a way that's really rapidly changing the world. And it's, to me, I find it so exciting. I love diving deep into this stuff. And like you said, it's like a little bit scary what stuff can do so quickly, but I'm super interested by it. In one of your videos, I recently saw you were talking, I think you refer to him as Flying Jim. You have a little guy, I think you said that you were using AI to write stories about Flying Jim.
So I designed this little wasp thing. I wanted to try my hand out at 3D sculpting. So I use Mesh Mixer, which is an older program, but it still works great and it's free. If you've been wanting to try it, go try it. But yeah, so I designed this little wasp and I told AI, I was like, look, this wasp's name's Flying Jim. He's always smiling. He's friendly. I want you to write me a children's story about this thing. And when I read this children's story that it wrote in 30 seconds, a very long story, but I'm like, my kid would definitely listen to this. If this was a story, people's kids would definitely listen to this. I don't know what the legalities are of publishing a book AI wrote.
Yeah.
I guess as long as you give the AI credit, you gave it the prompt, it's your character. I don't know how that works, but I'm going to start doing a reading of Flying Jim stories on TikTok. I haven't started yet, but maybe having my new microphone and everything, I'll be able to record some good voiceovers and get everything to sound decent.
I can picture you coming out with a line of Flying Jim books that come accompanied with a tiny little 3D printed Flying Jim. I think that would be really cool.
So, yeah, I was definitely thinking about that. And, through TikTok, I've learned so much stuff from following other creators. And I seen a guy the other day that was talking about getting plushies made over in China
Oh, yeah.
and how he got his sample made. It was like $150 or something. I'm like, if I had a children's book and I sold a plushie with every one of them, I might be the next, I don't know, children's characters, Peppa Pig or whatever. I do know children's characters because I have 2 children. I try not to know too many children's characters anymore.
Yeah, I'm completely out of that realm of children's characters. As you were saying it, I was trying to rack my brain. I was like, I don't know, Rugrats. I'm not sure. I don't know what the kids are watching these days.
Mostly weird stuff that is made, YouTube videos that made with toys from the things they like. My kid likes to watch people playing with toys of the cartoons that he likes.
Interesting.
And some of them are weird. Some of them are real weird, like I've had to cut them off. I don't know what this guy is, where he's going
What
with
his
this,
angle is, yeah.
Yeah, we're cutting this guy off. You're gonna watch something else. YouTube is a great resource, but there's some weird stuff out there on the internet.
It's like a double-edged sword. I think it's the coolest thing in the world that anybody has the ability to just think of an idea and broadcast it to the world. But when you're living in a world full of millions and millions of people, it's not always the best thing to have everybody broadcasting to the world. But yeah, it's an interesting time that we live in, and to see how that's just changed society. And I'm so out of time. I didn't know that kids watch YouTube, but I guess that would only make sense now.
Oh,
I think I've heard of some young kid who makes toy reviews or something, and I heard I think he's maybe 8 years old. He makes $200 million a year.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and I've never seen any of his videos. I've just seen all of his toys in Walmart. I bet that kid don't even look like that no more. I hadn't seen him in about 5 or 6 years on any toys. You know what I'm saying? He's probably grown up now. He's probably 14, and he's probably grown out of.
And they're like, "How can we stunt this kid's growth? He's making too much money. He can't grow up." Yeah, jeez. Man, talk about like crazy way to grow up. I don't even know how you live a normal, like you go to school and you're like, don't tell me what to do. Your entire salary. Oh my God.
I can't even imagine $200 million a year. I can't even imagine. Well,
let alone at 8 years old.
If you want to see some of my early attempts at making videos, you can find my channel under Lomax Motorsport.
Oh, okay.
There's probably some stuff on there, probably 10 years old. When I joined YouTube, you couldn't post videos longer than 10 minutes.
Okay.
That's how long ago I joined YouTube. YouTube was just like, I think it was probably like the second year it was maybe going that I joined. I didn't really have a following until I started doing some of my car stuff on there. And then I had a kid and I quit doing my car stuff, and it's stalled, not done anything on there, which is why I was so glad to find TikTok, because I like the video form. I like of communicating. I like to be able to watch the videos, but because I have a short attention span, TikTok immediately was like, oh yeah, I like this. And I'm like, I can make a short video. It's easy.
Yeah.
And so I started playing with it, and I just kept making little videos. I originally started my page as like a extension of my business, and I say business because my 3D printing business, I'm not making a living. I'm not making a living doing 3D printing. This is my side gig. I started 3D printing so that I could further. It was a tool for me. 3D printing's always been a tool for me, and it's a way that I can create things. So I decided I should get into it. I don't know where I was going with this. You got to back me up. Remind me where I was at.
That's okay. No, I constantly lose my train of thought if I go too far off. But you were talking about you came from YouTube. Also, I started YouTube pretty early on, and I remember I started back when it was before you had the thumbs up or the thumbs out. It was like you had star ratings back on YouTube. Okay. It was like a square interface, and I remember back when I started, I was young at the time, and I would make videos in like my room of my parents' house, and my parents and my friends would be like, "Oh, you talk to a camera and post on the internet. That's really weird." It was weird back then, and now it's everyone. That's just everyone has like a YouTube or a TikTok or an Instagram. But back in the day, that was like when you told people like, "Oh, I'm making a video and putting it on the internet." They're like, "What are you talking about?"
Exactly. And now it's everybody just expects you to have YouTube or TikTok or Twitch, or the Twitch thing blows my mind. that used to, we would only sit around and watch other people play video games until it was our turn.
Yeah.
And now people are like simply going to look for people to watch them playing video games. It's, I don't know. I think it's cool that we're able to do it. I don't know, it just blows my mind that some of these people can make a living doing this.
I feel like I grew up at a really weird time because, again, I was like right when I was like maybe high school, college age. That's when you were first starting to get into this peak of people were becoming full-time YouTubers or full-time gamers. And it was this, like you said, never in a million years throughout the entire history of the world could you be like, oh, my job is to sit around and play video games or
Oh, yeah.
do what I make videos about making sourdough bread and I make a full-time living doing that. And then all of a sudden that was like an option for people. So it's crazy.
It just goes to show you that no matter what you're into, no matter how small a niche that you think you might be the only one into it, you have a community of people out there that are into the same thing as you are, no matter how weird or insignificant you think it might be to others. There are other people that will think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The 3D printing space, that's something that I just got one on a whim, similar to you. I was like, I've always like doing like more artistic things, and I didn't really have any sort of creative like outlet for a while. So I got into it for that. And I didn't think that there would be that many people online who were into 3D printing. And to my great surprise, the community around it is just like endless and really great people that do it.
Yeah, 3D printing is it was one of those things that was so far out of touch for so long for so many people that now that it's mainstream, some people can't believe it. I still talk to people today and they're, oh, you do 3D printing? Oh, that's really expensive. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, you can afford to buy one. Really? How much? You get one for $200. And they're like,
Yeah.
what? No way. You got to know a little bit. You're going to have to study a little bit. You're not going to be able to just plug this thing in like it's a Hewlett Packard. But it just amazes me that people still don't know, but yet there's so many people that are into the 3D printing. And I think with stuff like this new Bamboo Labs machine that's came out, that basically is the plug and play. I think it's going to open it up to so many more people that didn't have the technical skills to run an Ender3. You run an Ender3, you're going to learn a little bit about 3D printing.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have to learn a little bit of stuff. But it's just the technology being there and being that cheap to begin with is what made pathway for Bamboo's Labs to be able to even come out with a machine like they have for the $1,000. $1,000 is a lot of money to a lot of us. But to a lot of people, they thought that a 3D printer of that quality would be $5,000. They thought that. And when they learn, oh, well, I can get that for $1,000 instead of $5,000. Oh, yeah, I'm going to have one of those. For the rest of us, we'll just keep running our Ender3s and until they break, and then maybe we'll get something like the Bamboo. But
yeah, I have my standing right here, but my Ender3s are in my closet over there, and I love the Enders. I think they're a great learning tool. I say this a lot on here, but I just had a coworker who just got into 3D printing, and he jumped right in. He got a Bamboo Lab for his first 3D printer, and it's like a double-edged sword. It's great because day one he could jump in, and it worked great for him. He knew what he was doing, but then every now and then I'll get a call from him with like really simple troubleshooting things that he doesn't necessarily know how to do because he never learned on a printer that wasn't like plug and play to use. Yeah, but it'll be interesting. I'm like really excited to see how 3D printing comes along in the next couple of years and see what the adoption of that becomes, what people start to use it for, and it becomes more, if you want to call it, a mainstream thing that people have in their house, because it definitely seems like it's quickly becoming more affordable, but also more accessible in terms of you don't necessarily have to be like a mad scientist to know how to run a 3D printer.
With this AI coming out now, so I asked AI, I asked about Flying Jim. I said, look, I've designed this character and I have made a 3D model of it, but I would like to see your idea of what the 3D model of this character would look like. ChatGPT said that it made me a 3D model, and it said that it was going to put it on a searchable database, but it never sent me an email. I don't know if that's a capability that it wants to have that it just doesn't have. But now it said, I made you a model and here it is. Now, if I ever find that model, I'll definitely do a video about it. And I was hoping that was what was going to happen, because I was going to print it out and compare the two models of what we had, but I've not been able to find it yet. So until ChatGPT sends me the email, I guess it will be in limbo.
I was looking when I first got into 3D printing, looking to see if there was any AI models similar to the text-based prompt that you could write it out and then have it spit you out a 3D model. And there's a couple that like were in the beta phase at the time, but OpenAI, I think they're actually in the process of developing something. I believe it's called Pointy, similar to DALL-E, but Pointy. And that it's going to be a 3D modeling type software. So I'm curious to see. I think it's in its beta phase right now, and I think you access it through, maybe it's through Discord or it might be somewhere else that you access it through. But I'm really super excited to see how 3D modeling comes into play with that. And it's like a double-edged sword because you have all these amazing modelers out there who that's their livelihood and they make these beautiful things. So it's like you said with your book, who do you credit? Do you credit AI? Do you credit yourself? Do you credit the prompter? So it's crazy.
Just think about 5 years from now when we've got a Bamboo's lab that has AI and we could walk up to the Bamboo lab and say, hey, print me out a pot that's 8 inches tall that has an eagle on the front of it, riding a pony. And it does it. It just prints it out from its imagination of what you told it you wanted. We're that much closer to Star Trek replicators, which is the ultimate 3D printer. Let's face it, that's the ultimate 3D printer is to get some Earl Grey hot. Then we got everything. And if we can figure out how to actually take raw molecules and combine them together, we could actually have that technology, basically, if we can combine them together accurately enough. It is possible. We don't have the technology now, but we're getting a lot closer to it than we've ever been before. And if you think about it, we're in a time right now that, like, when the Wright brothers first took flight, because if you go back to look at what's going on with this fusion technology and the things we know about particles now, but it's just I feel that excitement that my great-grandmother's parents, because she was born in 1902, the year they started flying. You can just imagine what they started thinking when they heard that a man was in a machine flying like a bird. You know, it's probably the same feeling we get from them finding fusion. It's just, where do we go with it from here? In 100 years, look how far the flight technology took off. What will happen with this fusion technology in 100 years? It's just a really exciting time to be alive. That's all.
No, it really is. And I think it's like almost hard to give yourself that, what, like you were saying, like living back in 1902 and you see these two crazy guys are flying through the air with this like wooden canvas machine. And I think maybe it's hard for some people to have like I think some people can and I think some people can't. Some people can look at that and they see the vision of where that's going to go. And I think some people are like, these guys are crazy. But one of my favorite places, I always say, I love to go to DC and I love to go to the Smithsonian. They have all these just halls and halls of inventions and stuff that like, at one time it was a cutting edge. And that I get so excited going through there and just exactly like you were saying, thinking back to what it must have been like to see things that like now are so like obvious or so simple to us, but like imagining what it must have been like to see that come out and just thinking about where we're at. And I always think right now, we all carry around our phones every day, but I always imagine in maybe 20 years or 10 years, who knows what the timeline is, we're going to look back and we're going to be like, how silly was it that we used to carry around these bricks with us everywhere? It'll just be, maybe it's integrated into you or something, but it's I just love nerding out about that kind of stuff.
Maybe drop it in your eye. The technology, where's it going to stop? I am blind in my right eye. Not all the way blind. I have depth perception, but I've always had problems with vision in my right eye. And not too long ago, they were working on bionic eye. And I think I would take a bionic eye if I could see better than I can now. I've always had a slight problem with depth perception. I'm sure it's hindered some things in my life, but it would just be interesting to be able to take on that technology and use it. I seen the other day that they put like a Bluetooth, not actual Bluetooth, but they put a thing in a guy's spine, up in his spinal cord, and then down in his back, and they're wirelessly sending the signals from his brains to his legs, where his spinal cord was broken before. Now he can walk.
Wow.
We figured out enough about the human brain. Have you seen the AI that can read your brain? They put people in this thing, MRI or whatever, and they showed them a video. The AI can take their brain waves and put together what it thinks they are watching, and it is eerily accurate. When you get off here, you need to go look at
Oh,
it. It is
wow.
freaking spooky. So what they're saying with this technology is we're going to be able to record our dreams in our sleep. So you're going to be able to put a helmet on, go to sleep, and that dream that you was telling everybody that was so weird, they're actually going to be able to view what you were doing in your dream. What timeline are we even living in?
It's a crazy world.
You got to go look it up when we're done here. It's spooky. What implications could it be used to search your mind?
Yeah.
Could they hold you against your will and read what your mind's thinking? Or how are you going to stop from thinking?
Yeah.
If you did a crime, you're probably going to sit there and think about it, and they're going to be able to tell. They're going to see you shoot the guy. That's what he's thinking about. Memory plate. And another thing I was listening to today is about, I'm listening to a lot of podcasts because I drive a lot for my regular job. They've got this airplane that will fly over and it takes a bunch of pictures of a town. And then when they have a robbery or something, they can rewind back and look at the pixels and say, oh, that's the car that the guy got into. And they can follow the car to where it went to. Not only that, they can rewind it from where it came from. It's crazy technology. And they're flying 2 miles up in the sky. So you can't even see them flying over your city.
Interesting.
And they can take these pictures and they can analyze now they can't see your face. They can just see pixels, but they can see that this pixel went here and then this pixel went there. And then these two pixels came together and then they came apart. And if you couple that with CCTV and geolocation on your phone, it ain't gonna be long before they're gonna know everything.
Moral of the story here is if you were thinking of committing a crime in the near future, this is not the time to be committing a crime in.
Well, don't do any crimes.
Yeah, don't do it regardless.
That would be the good thing of this technology, would be able to stop crimes. But what happens when this technology gets in the wrong hands? What happens when they just start following people and then saying, oh, we seen you went to this many stores yesterday. Here's some ads. We're going to send them to your phone now. Which they do already. We all know. We've all been talking around our phone about something obscure, and then we get on Facebook, and then the next thing, here's an ad, and then you go on TikTok, and you got 3 videos about it. Somebody's listening somewhere, which, when I got that, I traded in my Nokia 3300. The little you could charge it for a week. Good, but it would only hold 120 text messages. Yeah. When I got that iPhone, I was like, look, no, I'm giving up my privacy, but maybe one day it will save me because somebody will say I was somewhere that I wasn't, and I'll be able to see my phone. I was right. So I guess it's a double-edged sword, just like everything else too.
Yeah, man, it's what a crazy world.
I would not go back to not having a smartphone.
I think that's a funny thing I'll hear people say. People be like, oh, I was born in the wrong time. I'm like, listen, I don't think you want to go back to before having a smartphone, the internet, all these great luxuries we have now.
Yeah. The quality of life these days is so much better.
Yeah.
So much better. And even though the internet at my house is slow, I can still stream. I can't stream talking to you, but I can at least
download it.
I can download. Which I'm sure there's plenty of third world countries that got better internet than we got out in the country out here. Because, hey, how else are scammers scamming people?
Yeah.
But I'm thankful for what I got because it could be worse. I know a lot of people that they can't stream because they just don't have the internet. And then, unfortunately, I don't know about where you live, but here in North Carolina, everything east of 95, if it were its own state, it would be the poorest state in the country. Okay, until you get to the actual coast, everything between 95, which goes north and south, and the coast is nothing but farmland. There's just not that many people out there, so they just don't spend the money on the infrastructure, which I guess wireless is going to be the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's Elon Musk, he does that Starlink, where I think that's how they're bringing that internet to like different countries. I don't know a whole lot about it, but
would pay for Starlink, except for a lot of people around here are on the waiting list, which everybody says, oh, get the RV version or whatever. And from my understanding is that you've got to move it every 30 days if you have the RV one.
Okay.
Now, people have told me that's not the case. I don't know. They did just put a Verizon tower about 1,300 foot from my house. So I'm hoping that I can get some good 5G signal from that bad boy. They were putting the final touches on it this week, so I'm hoping they'll get it up soon so I can get some decent internet, because I would love to be able to go live more from my house, show more of what I do. It's just, I go to upload a 3-minute TikTok. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes to upload just a 3-minute TikTok.
Yeah.
So that pretty much puts any YouTube videos, like, you're not going to upload it. I would have to drive to the McDonald's down the street.
Okay. So changing topics a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into 3D printing?
Actually used to be a jeweler. My father was
Oh,
a jeweler growing up, so I got into it at a young age. And in about 3, I think, I went and took a class on a 3D design software that was called Gem Vision. It is a plug-in for a 3D program called Rhino. Rhino was pretty, I don't say it's basic, it's really a strong software, but everything is basic what's in it. You had to be able to draw your shapes, and then you couldn't really do an extrusion. It was not like 3D software is exactly today. That's how I got into it, and it was really, I went to a week-long class to learn it. We could not afford a 3D printer back then because most 3D printers were like the powder that grew. And they were $50,000 back then. So we would send all the things that we designed out to a company that would do that for us. And they would he would get a model back and make a mold of that and then shoot wax into it. Or we would have a casting company cast it, because there's companies out there that do that. So that's how I got into 3D design. Started following the RepRap project, and I always wanted to build one. There was a lot of technical skill involved in that, and it wasn't the cheapest thing. It was still, I think, about $600 to get a kit for all the parts you needed. It was just a little bit beyond what I could afford. So I'd always see 3D printing stuff and, in Popular Mechanics magazine and, some on some like YouTube videos and stuff or science stuff. But it was mostly stuff that was still out of reach of the regular person. In 2019, I was sitting there looking at something on YouTube, and I saw that the price of resin printers was cheap. Like, you could get a resin printer for $150. And I'm like, how good could this thing be? So I did a little research and started watching some videos on YouTube, and there were people making products with this that were definitely detailed enough that you could make a mold from it for jewelry. So I got my dad to get one. I said, I'll learn how to use it, and then I'll teach you and your wife how to use it, and y'all can use it for your jewelry business. So that's what I did. 2019, I got them going on that. New Year's 2019, 2020, I was sitting on the porch, and I seen an ad for Ender3, and they're like, oh, it's going to end in 4 hours. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to order this, $169. I'm getting it. So I got my first Ender3. It arrived in like February of 2020.
okay.
And so I started printing it, looking on Thingiverse and finding stuff to print. And I know nothing about 3D design for 3D printing on my own yet, really. And so I'm doing stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. And then COVID hit. By the time COVID hit, the first time I ran my printer and I set up a print, and I was like, this is going to take 7 hours. I was like, oh, no, I need another one of these so it can be print thing and then print another thing at the same time.
Yes.
So I ended up ordering 2 more printers, Ender3s, and I had those set up and running. And then COVID hit, and I went to my friends at the local hardware store. I don't know if you've seen some of my videos. I used to work for a hardware store, so they are my main supplier for parts and stuff now. And they also allow me to take parts there to let people pick up and let people drop off parts for me to remake and stuff like that. So we've got a little thing going. They have people that can't find stuff that in their store, they offer to have me make it for them. It's a nice little beneficial little relationship. So I went down to the hardware store and I said, look, I've not been able to find any masks. I found a file for masks. We can start making these masks and sell them to carpenters and stuff that need dust masks. And they said, yeah, Mike, that sounds good. We can probably sell them. They said, but we've got fire departments that can't even find masks. And I said, I don't feel right about charging the fire department for. So I tell y'all what, if y'all will buy some material, I'll donate the time on my 3 printers. and we'll print some masks and we'll give them to the fire department. So it started simple enough like that. We printed these masks, gave them to the fire department. The next thing you know, the police department found out, so they wanted some masks. Then the EMS found out and they wanted some masks. Then the nursing home found out and they wanted some masks. So we started a project. And the next thing you know, the local newspapers wrote an article about us. And I told the reporter, I said, anybody wants to help us out, we can buy another one of these printers for $200, buy us a printer, and we'll use it. And when we get done, we'll donate it to the school system.
Mhm.
So we had outpouring from the community, and we raised, I don't even know how much money we raised. We ended up running 15 printers, but we ended up buying
Wow.
like 7 or 8 more. And then we had people from the community that were letting us borrow theirs. And we were just running mostly Ender3s. I had one CR10 that a guy had let us borrow, and we ran a couple into the ground. But when we were done, we had printed over 1,200 masks,
Oh
and
my
we
God.
were doing all this in PETG. And you got to remember, I'd only been printing for about a month in PLA before I started all this. It was a crash course, and I was working my regular job too. So I had 15 printers in the spare bedroom at my house. We were printing 2 masks on each printer. We were only using a 0.4 nozzle because I didn't know about bigger nozzles. It was taking about 12 hours, I think, to print 2 masks. So we were getting about
Wow.
4 masks every 24 hours from each printer. My wife was changing prints during the day when I was not there. I would wake up in the middle of the night and change prints. And we did this basically for about 6 months. It was just, I'm so tired of printing masks. I was like, I want to use my printers to print something for myself. I've been looking at all this stuff for the past 3 or 4 months on here on Thingiverse, and I can't print it because all these printers are running. And then luckily, we got enough by then. We were able to shut the project down. We were able to give 5 working printers to the Moore County school systems, the county I live in here. And I think we gave them $3,000 or $4,000 to, I don't remember what it was because I wasn't the one taking in the money. The hardware store was doing that because they're the ones that set up to do the accounting and stuff. But it was really fun. It was a good feeling that I could actually do something for my community with this newfound tool that I got. And so that's what got me into 3D printing. That's how I started all this whole journey.
That is one of the craziest introduction to 3D printing stories I have heard to this date yet. I had so many questions about that. So, like, when you were saying that you were printing these masks, I'm curious to hear about these masks. What I was imagining is maybe you guys were using something like a TPU or like a flexible material, and they were like a thin sheet of plastic, but it sounds like that's not what they were.
No, so they were more like, they were a 2-piece mask that you could put a filter into in between the
Okay.
2 pieces. And first part would fit on your face, and I didn't have the ability to print TPU, and I don't really know anything about TPU. I don't know if
Yeah.
in 2020 TPU is even a thing, really.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? TPU, pretty much a kind of a, I'm pretty sure that they had it for industrial printers and stuff. So what we were doing is we were telling people that they could mold it to their face. And so we were showing them that they could, there's actually a YouTube video online of us showing how to mold them to your face and everything. And we're telling people to put them in hot water and everything. But then we had 3 firemen burn themselves because they put the mask into boiling water to soften the edges, but then they put it right on their face right afterwards. And so we had to train one guy, look, man, you got to let this stuff cool off because this stuff will stick to you. And
Yeah.
so luckily only 3 of them burnt themselves. But you think firemen would know.
If anybody wasn't going to burn themselves, you would think it would be them. But
That's what you would think. But they were all very appreciative because they weren't able to get masks at the time. And at least the ones we were able to give them would put a little confidence in them when they had it because they were dealing with the people that were sick.
yeah.
And we ended up giving masks to, I think, about 12 different law enforcement and first responder agencies. It was quite a few of the North Carolina State Troopers, the local sheriff's department. It got to be quite a bit bigger than our little community here. People were just taking any help they could get at the time. And man, it was a weird time because with my job, I was out on the roads and it was just really spooky with nothing going on. And at the time I was like, look, I'm just going to print these masks and hopefully everything works out. And if it don't, well, at least I did what I could. And glad it seems like that we're not having as many outbreaks and stuff like that now. And thank God there's no reason to print any more masks, because I never want to print another face mask in my life. I'm just done with that file. Yeah, that was.
They'll be doing the brain scans of your brain with the nightmares, and they'll be pulling up a file of the mask. They'll be like, oh, it's strange. You've never seen this before in a scan.
Exactly.
Now, I didn't get my 3D printers until about 6 months ago, so I wasn't printing during COVID. Was it difficult to get filament during COVID?
So, like I said, we were just running PETG, and we were getting it from Amazon. We weren't having much problem, and we were ordering it like 30 and 40 rolls at a time.
Wow.
It's really crazy how much filament we went through with this project. Had so many like those. We were using ceramic filament, and they send you in their PETG. They used to send you a little 200 by 200 build stick on bed, like a print bed, but they were too small for a whole Ender bed. Cut them up and put them on glass. I cut them up in pieces and put them on glass because I use a lot of I use mirror for my glass beds, printers, and you don't want to print PETG directly on glass because it will definitely bond to it, and you will have glass embedded in your part. So that build tack, so you either got to put that build sheet down or glue, hairspray. I don't like the smell of hairspray, so I don't use it. We were using blue painter's tape. We only found one brand that works, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to do a lot of experimenting then because we were just trying to pump these things out. So we found one thing that worked. We stuck with it. About 3/4 of the way through the project, I said, we should get bigger nozzles. It can print so much faster. And so I did start getting 0.6 nozzles, and that's what's led me on to now my machines. I standardly keep 1 millimeter nozzles on most of my machines.
Wow.
And people are like, you lose so much detail. Do you know how small 1 millimeter is? 1 millimeter is incredibly tiny. Unless you're making miniatures, like the thing you got in the background there, the mug you got in the background.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you can't tell much difference between a 1 millimeter nozzle and a 0.6. And you got to remember the difference between a 0.6 and a 1 millimeter, you're almost going to save half the time. So if you've got something with a 0.6 or a 0.4 that prints in 4 to 6 hours, with a 1 millimeter nozzle, it's going to print in 2 to 3. Right. And for most things, especially all these things that we print to use around our house, hoods, do yourself a favor, go get yourself a 1 millimeter nozzle. You can use a thicker layer height. You'll have more layer height, but you can run a 0.2 with a 1 millimeter nozzle. I do it all the time. I do sometimes run a 0.12 layer height if I've got something that I don't want to go through the trouble of filling the layer lines in with Bondo or whatever. I don't know. I just challenge everybody to try a 1 millimeter nozzle and tell me you don't like it. It's okay if you don't like it, but at least try it, especially for those that can't afford a bamboo. If you want to print 3 times faster than your 0.4 millimeter nozzle on your Ender3, just get you a 1 millimeter nozzle and it's done. Change a few settings in your slicer and off to the races.
I keep telling myself I'm going to switch out my nozzle, and I still haven't. So maybe after this will be like the final motivation I need to switch it out. What I've been doing recently, my slicer is, to your point, people are like, oh, you're going to see, it's going to be so much detail that you're losing. I've been going from I think like in Cura's what I used to slice my prints and millimeter layer lines. I've been going down to the fast speed 0.28 millimeter. That's cut a ton of time off my prints too. And like you said, I don't think you could notice the difference. I don't see it. So I'll have to go up to a bigger nozzle to really speed things up.
Look, so anybody that's hesitant, order you one of those packs that has like a 0.4 all the way to a 1. And that way you don't got 20 of them. But when I'll order the box of 24 because brass nozzles are disposable. I'm not going to, if it gets clogged, I'm pulling it out and I'm throwing it away. My time is worth more than that. But a 60-cent brass nozzle, I'm just not going to spend the time over. I'm going to throw it over in my metal bucket, and when I retire, I'll melt it down and make some art out of it. That's my retirement plan, Kate, is all the scrap metal I pull off of jobs and stuff, I'm saving in buckets, and then I'm going to separate it out when I retire, and then I'm going to melt it down and make some bronze statues and make some different stuff. Because I've got copper, bronze, brass. I've got all that saved up and in my hoard of stuff. Yeah, well, it's going to get... The older I get, the weirder it's going to get. for sure.
Interesting. Have you done anything, any sort of metal art before, or anything like melting down metal like that?
In jewelry, I did a lot of cast.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I did a lot of
Okay.
casting. So before we used to do CAD CAM stuff with and growing waxes and machining waxes, everything was hand carved.
Okay.
I used to take wax, take a chuck of wax, and I used to carve what I wanted out of a ring. And my carving skills are only so good. A lot of times I could imagine something that I couldn't make
Mm.
back then, but to be able to take a wax and then you put it in a plaster, you melt the wax out, and then you shoot the metal in where the wax used to be. So I've done a lot of casting. Most of it with a centrifugal cast, which is like a big metal drum. You wind it up. It's so much fun. Oh, it was so cool when I was a kid. You wind this thing up, and then you got a crucible. You melt your metal, okay? And then you take your flask, which has got your melted out wax, so it's got a cavity in it, and it's hot. So
Okay.
you take it out of this 2,000-degree oven. You stick it in this thing. You melt your metal, and then you let the spring go on this thing, and it centrifugally slings the metal into the cast, to the flask. And
Yeah.
it's really scary because you've got some 1,500-degree gold sitting here that's a molten puddle, and then you let this thing go, and it makes such a big whoosh, and this thing will spin for about 5 minutes, like while it's winding down and cooling down. And then you pull the flask out, and you dunk it in some water, and it makes this boiling sound. And then you've got your metal piece. And then, of course, you got to go through all the filing and stuff from there. But yeah, so you can making sculptures or busts, people or whatever with casting is basically the same thing, except for you're probably not going to be doing the centrifugal thing on big stuff.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's the same principle. You know
How
what I'm
hard
saying?
could it be? Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that I think I could do brain surgery if you let me watch 3 YouTube videos about how to do it. And maybe had somebody there to remind me, be like, hey, you forgot to do this. But I'm the firm believer, anything you want to learn, you can go to YouTube and watch videos about it. And if you're a fairly competent person about just being able to observe and pick things, you can learn enough that you can do some of this stuff. Now, casting big bunch of metal, you might want some safety people because you could get hurt really bad. But don't let that stop you. It's the only way you're going to do it. I really want to try some Lost PLA casting, which is where I print the item and then melt the item out and then use that instead of a wax.
Oh,
You
okay.
use the PLA that you printed, use the object you printed in PLA for your plug in your mold. Print like in vase mode or print with a lightning infill and make it hollow. They're able to just to pour the hot metal in and it consumes the PLA and
Okay.
fills the void at the same time. I
Interesting.
haven't tried it. Yeah, that's one of those things. If I could just make content full time, these are the things y'all would see from me, but can't afford to yet.
Not yet, but I imagine sometime very soon. As you were talking about the centrifugal force machine that you had and you were talking about spinning around, I do have to say that it did sound like one of those like potential safety hazards, but it's such I love hearing about these different things that things that I've never tried before, but it's so interesting to me hearing how these things are made.
If you're most people that do jewelry these days are gonna have invested in a vacuum caster, which is a way less violent of a way of doing. Basically, you have your flask and you produce a vacuum on the bottom side of it and pour the metal in the top side. And the vacuum just sucks it all in there to where it's supposed to. A lot safer way and a lot less dramatic way of being able to do the same thing.
Arguably less fun though. Yeah. So the final thing that I'll ask you about today, closing out and I guess going into you doing content full time, one of the videos that you had recently that blew up was you and your son at Tractor Supply, and they had this sign there. I guess maybe I'll let you tell the story because you probably tell it way better than I ever could, but I think the internet just fell in love with this piece of content from you.
I have a 10-year-old son named Jackson. He is extremely autistic. He mostly only communicates in 1 or 2 words. He loves to go to Tractor Supply, and for some reason, he loves their sign that says welding and tools. And he didn't know what an ampersand was, so he calls it welding is tools because it looks like an S to him. He loves to go in there. We've been going in there for about 2 years now, and him looking at this sign. And not long ago, we went into the one on one side of our town, and they had taken the sign down. And I was like, "Oh, no, they've taken the sign down." And I asked the people, I was like, "Hey, if the old signs are around." They're like, "I think we sent them back to corporate." And I'm like, "Okay." So then we go to this other Tractor Supply that's really close to us, and they still have the signs up. So I was like, "Man, it ain't gonna be long before they're gonna be remodeling this place. I need to make a video." And I bet if I ask TikTok to tag Tractor Supply so my kid can get a sign, that they'll be glad to do it. And of course, the video took off, and Tractor Supply was tagged, I don't know, a couple thousand times in this video. And of course, they immediately reached out to me and asked me if they could send us a sign. And I said, yeah. And they said, it's probably going to be like a week. And then they called me back and they're like, can you just come to the store tomorrow? We'll just give you that one. And I'm like,
Yeah.
hell yeah. It's definitely in their interest to do it because the video ended up getting, I think it's just 2.6 million views right now.
Yeah.
And the response video of him getting the sign has got almost 400,000 views. I ended up getting like almost 10,000 new followers just off that video. And felt like I had to go on there and explain to these people, hey, look, this channel is not all about my kid all the time. I appreciate y'all following me. I hope you'll stay. It gets weird around here sometimes, just in case. But it seems like that I'm getting a pretty good response from my new followers. They seem to like me. And I'm just humbled that so many people would take the time out of their day to help my kid. It just feels really good because being different, he don't get to do all the things normal kids do all the time. And so it's little things like that they just really make me feel good about people, about other people. Because you hear so many stories about people not being so good to people. It's just nice to have a story that's good. And for a company, they could easily just blew me off, but they didn't. Actually, we've been up there a couple times since then and talked to the manager again. And they've told me they're actually going to save every single sign in that store when they remodel it so he can have them. So I guess we got 20 signs coming probably next year. And it's just heartwarming that somebody would do that for my kid. I was expecting the video to do decent, but I figured, oh, maybe I'll get 1,000 likes. Maybe if I could get 10,000 views, that would be phenomenal. And I never really expected it to take off as good as it did. Yeah. Ultimately, I'm glad he got his sign because he loves that thing.
Yeah, that was it. Honestly, it's one of the most standout things that I've seen on the internet and one of the longest times I can think of. And it was exactly like you said, it was so heartwarming. And like the response that they had so quickly to reach out to you guys, I think was really great. And I honestly, I'm mostly so glad that he got his sign, but for them as well, I constantly now, every time I think of Tractor Supply, I'm like, gives me warm, fuzzy feelings inside and makes me want to go inside. But no, it's a story that I loved following along with it. And it's cool to hear that he'll continue to have more signs as they start to remodel that. So I know that I loved it. I know that a lot of the internet loved that story.
And Tractor Supply seems like a really good company from reading the comments of people that have worked there in the past. 99% of them is like, oh yeah, I loved working there. It was a great company. Only one or two were, oh, I didn't work in there. They did. And I feel they're probably a pretty good company. And I'm happy with our relationship that we've got going on right now. We don't have no business relationship going on really, but I've taken a couple. So my cups that I dropped off at Habitat, I don't know if I did a couple cup drops at Tractor Supply after that happened. Try to show my appreciation to them for helping my kid out. Nobody's found those cups yet, or nobody's said anything. And for all I know, maybe Tractor Supply corporate called the places I dropped them off and said, hey, you've got to pull these cups out. You can't be having this guy. I don't know, but I like to think that they're still there and that somebody is going to go to the Tractor Supply store and find these things that I left and maybe make a TikTok about it.
That would be, like I said, you're a bit of a Tractor Supply celebrity now. If you live in that area, maybe go scope out some Tractor Supplies and see if you can find those cups there.
Yeah, the guy will look like this.
You've got a very recognizable look. I think you're very recognizable from your creations that you make to your videos to your look in general. Yeah, no, I absolutely love the content that you make. For people who don't follow you yet and want to follow along it's going to get real weird, guys. So follow along for sure. Where can people find you on the internet to check out your videos?
All right, pretty much on every social media, you can find me under Sandhills or Sandhills3D and Laserworks. Usually if you just type in Sandhills3D, I'll come up. Google knows who I am. So you can find me pretty easy. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I don't post a whole lot on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. Most of my stuff's going to be on TikTok. So if you want to follow along, that's probably the best place to do it.
Thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing. We went through a million different topics. We could have went through a million more, but I really appreciate you taking the time out. And with that said, that is Meet the Makers.
Thank you.